Should a regulator fine you or help you get more resilient? Welcome to Threat Talks. My name is Lieuwe Jan Koning, and here from the Security Operations Center at Ontoit, the subject of today is a refreshing approach by a supervisory regulator, the RDI. Let's get on to it. Welcome to Threat Talks. Let's delve deep into the dynamic world of cybersecurity. Let me introduce my guest of today. His name is Jasper Nagtegaal, and I'm thrilled he is here because he is the Director of Digital Resilience at the RDI. And the RDI is the body that's responsible for a lot. Well, I'll ask Jasper in a minute what it actually is because it's a lot. But the point here is that with the upcoming NIS2 regulations, and especially all those more companies that actually fall under this regulation, Jasper is the guy to talk to because his organization is actually going to supervise all of them. So that's interesting for any Dutch company, any European company, companies abroad that invest in the Netherlands. But there's also something to learn from the approach, which I truly think is refreshing, to me at least. So it's about time that we talk to him about this. I'm really thrilled about it. Jasper, welcome. Before we start about this subject, I'd like to know what industry you feel is the most mature in safety in general.
Well, Lieuwe, the first one that pops to mind in my head is aviation, I would say. I've learned from that a little bit in the past, and also a little bit inspires me in our current approach in supervision. It's about the just culture they introduced a long time ago in aviation. Mm-hmm. That's about really admitting on the faults or incidents that happen and be open and evaluate and learn from them, and from there get better and better and better. Because yes, safety for people in the air, it's
nobody wants
a
problem there. Yeah, I once read that it's actually if I go on a trip to the United States, which I do often, the chance that I get killed is higher on my road trip to the airport than from the airport abroad. Is that true?
I don't know if it's true by numbers, so I don't have the data to examine. But I also tell this to my children if we go on a holiday trip and say airplane or car. I said airplane is safer.
Better take the train, maybe even if that's available.
Yeah, that's more.
Okay. Because and why I'm asking this because I mean maybe you can explain a little bit about the RDI because it's not just cybersecurity that you're dealing with. It's much broader than that, and especially in your career, you've seen many different verticals. So please explain.
Yeah, well, it's the Dutch Authority for Digital Infrastructure, and we've come a long way from radio communications to where we are right now. And our work is you can capture it in one mission, and that's about a secure and safely connected Netherlands. And there you hear it already. It's about connections, so networks, but also devices and everything that you need to stay connected. So cables underground, but radio communications above ground through the air. So all the things we use and need to be digitally connected in economy and society. That's where we have a role, and sometimes we monitor. It's about scarcity, so it's also about giving out permits to use the radio frequency, the spectrum. But it's also about looking into market, all products and coming into the EU market have to be safe and secure. But it's also about secure networks. So are they resilient? Are they continuously available, for example?
That's a lot.
Yeah, that's a lot.
And we'll talk about it a little bit later, but your jurisdiction, so to speak, is the country of the Netherlands. Yeah. There's comparable bodies in the rest of Europe and in America and Canada also. We'll touch about it, but you have a lot of experience, right? Apparently this is quite this aligned with the country borders, how this is done.
Yeah. So, and it's on an international scale. So if you talk about radio communications, is international. They have to be interoperable because otherwise you cannot use your phone in the States, for example. So but it's also in an EU scale. So there's all kinds of standardization and normalization procedures, international and also within the EU. And within the EU, of course, we have the whole digital regulation framework from the Commission. They pushed out last couple of years. That's also a lot. So you have to work together. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Actually, it reminds me. You mentioned we have to standardize all these things. I remember that certain frequencies were not possible in the Netherlands because there was some kind of military thing in the north where they need it for unspecified. I won't ask you
military,
what they needed it for. Yes,
that's commonly known as for military purposes. But then it's used. And if you want to have this frequency used by network operators for the 5G networks, then you have to do something about it if you want to roll out that properly. Now, and that took some time.
This is all part of what RDI.
We're also involved there, also with our Ministry of Economic Affairs, of course, also play a big role. But we work together on that sort of cases. Yeah.
Okay, so can you explain a little bit? Well, maybe there's NIS2. I mentioned that in the maybe summarize it in 2 sentences, or what for those who haven't heard of it.
NIS2.
Yeah.
NIS2 directive, mainly aimed at boosting the digital resilience of the European economy, I would say. Yeah.
The focus is on resilience, huh?
Yeah.
Because what I said in the introduction, I mean, I think it's a refreshing approach that you take. Because I asked, well, could you answer the question? Is it better to find or to build resilience?
I would say to build resilience, of course. Finding is just it's a tool we use. It's a part of enforcement. But no, I would say building resilience. Take a risk-based approach on having a resilient economy or a resilient company you lead. Yeah.
So you have this legislation. That's your weapon, so to speak, and then of course you have the authority to issue fines, etc.
Yeah.
But you said no. If we let it play out all the way until the end, where the fine is needed, we have actually already failed.
Then you're failing.
Well, at least as a country.
I heard a good phrase within a group of other supervisors, and it was about how do I say it right? It's about enforcement or fining is the most pricey part of supervision, because it doesn't help me. It doesn't help a company, because we have to take a lot of time to do in-depth investigation, and then you have to go to court maybe, because otherwise you don't like to be fined. So you use your protection based in Dutch administrative law, and then we have a whole process just about one company building on a little bit of compliance there, and us trying to push a fine. That's all at the end of the tail, because the
disaster had already happened.
The big gain is at the front.
It's a bit like in healthcare. You better screen, do a regular health screening, so you don't in a very late stage discover you have cancer. Because if you do it early on, is that kind of mechanism?
Yeah, it's preventive. So so supervision should be on a preventive matter, and building digital resilience within a sector or an economy. Yeah.
So can you explain a little bit what are you doing to achieve this?
That's first of all this, like being out there and explaining how we operate and how our perspective is on supervision and enforcement, of course, and getting into touch also upfront with all our sectoral responsibilities. So with the energy sector or space or a lot of industries, telecommunications, cloud, etc., etc. And we want to be there. So we are approaching branch organizations and talking to them, trying to establish some sort of vision about how do they work, what are the main concerns, risks in those sectors, and then approaching from a business side. So how do they work, and how can we find an angle to work with them together to crank up the resilience there. Yeah.
So suppose I am in critical infrastructure. I'm part of a company, let's say an energy company or so. What would you? So you would knock on the door, phone them up,
phone them up,
and say, well, listen, we need to talk.
Yeah,
right? Because we have NIS2 and we're concerned.
Yeah,
how does that work?
Mainly, basically like that. So we make an appointment. And then we say, okay, we come to you. And then
and they're all frightened because the regulator is there.
Some of them, some are quite sturdy and they say, okay, let's have it on. But no. But when you're there, what we did in the last couple of years was also inviting in that talk the CEO of the company. So the boardroom awareness was right from the start was there. And then we try to understand how your business works. So that's one of the first things my inspectors do, is trying to understand the business and how they approach resilience or security or safety in that company. And as you named the energy sector, for instance, is they really work from a safety perspective already there. So continuity in electricity, that's the main thing. We don't want no electricity in society. We can't handle that. So we need it. So, and they know that. So they build on safety in those industry and in the energy sector. And they already have a whole risk management process in place in that company and in that sector. So if you take an approach with a totally different security talk about hackers and state actors, etc., then they say, yeah, right. And they don't really believe you. But if you take an approach from their risk perspective in the board, so yeah, but if you get hacked or your systems are down or your data is not available or stolen, then you're out of business. And that's the same thing about safety. So if you incorporate this risk perspective on digital assets also in your risk management approach that you already have, then you can work with it. And they said,
so you build on a
idea.
culture that's already there then. Huh?
It's already there. Yeah.
And you're just showing the way, listen, it's not just the flu that is there or a flood or whatever. It's also the cyber risk.
It's also the cyber risk. And then you have a talk. And then
what comes out of this? Because it's really nice. Huh? So you're educating them more or less, and helping them understand more. And then what?
Well, next step is trying to understand which standards they use. So, for example, in energy sector or an industry sector, they are much more accustomed to a 62443 standard, and not 70,001. 27,001. So that's there. So then you use that approach to talk with them about how do you approach security, for example. But we also do deep dives. So if we do a risk analysis on, everything goes wrong. And it will surely happen once in your lifetime as a company. It will go wrong. Then we approach them with the question, what's about your business continuity? How do you approach your business continuity in your organization? And then we do a deep dive throughout different companies, and then we analyze and try to find out what's the biggest problem or risk there. So not on an individual company, but also on a sector-wide level, and try to establish some sort of idea what's wrong.
Translate like it's like a consult that you have with an auditor beforehand. But then for free, I guess. I mean, you can also hire a company for to help you play this out.
Yeah, sure.
But you're proactively.
Proactively doing that because we work from public interest, and that's I think important to say. I'm not there to be a police on your compliance. So standing right beside you and are you doing it wrong? And you're doing that wrong. And
you're there with your notebook, looking at the firewalls that are in the wrong place.
And that's not the person in the company says, "What am I doing wrong?" And then you say, I don't like you doing that." Okay, that's very precise. That's not. We have people in place who can do that, but that's not our main approach.
You don't want to end up doing that.
No, and then you're a police officer standing on the sideline, but you want to have a real steward approach on the whole system. Yeah.
How do you decide which organization to approach? Because you cannot have, there are so many organizations.
No. So we have a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. So thousands.
Yeah.
Risk-based.
So you have to employ half the nation.
Yeah. So you have a lot of efforts now, but we have a risk-based approach, just like a company itself.
Risk-based again.
Of course, because that's our business. So our business is supervising, and the business of a company is. Yeah, all companies have different business, but they have a risk-based approach. We also have one. Yeah.
Is that something that's already in the law, or is there committees or the government that steers this or gives you focus areas?
There is room for a risk-based approach. So that's NIS2. It really literally says take a risk-based approach. So it's there. And there's also room in our own approach because supervisors or regulatory bodies are independent, so they have their own policies on how to approach a sector or a supervisory problem or target. Yeah.
How independent are you really? At some point, maybe the politics interfere, or is it completely separated?
Politics always play a role. So a minister, or you call it in the States, a secretary of state, they have a little bit of influence, so they can say upfront, it's really important that you pay attention to this topic or this risk. But they cannot intervene on a detailed level in the program of a regulator.
Yeah, because you have the knowledge on where your real risk is, I guess.
Yes,
because that's your profession.
That's
right?
our profession.
So, but you have the freedom to choose if you some day feel maybe it's the solar panels.
Yeah.
We need to. It's nowhere in the law, nowhere on the agenda of the politicians.
No.
You can decide. Okay, and now we're going to go after this, and we are going to educate them.
Yeah, and that's risk based. So we do analysis, and they say this is the topic. And of course, you sometimes have incidents, big incidents. We had last couple of months we had 2 big ones about the public prosecution in the Netherlands. And also with healthcare systems, with a research company, and then there is real public, how you call it, well, the people are a little bit angry and concerned, and they want to do, is there something done about it? And then you have supervisory authorities stepping in because there's public arousal, public interest in place, and then you have to step in. Yeah.
Okay.
So then comes politics.
So and how important is this fining part then? Because I can imagine if you, I really like the approach, helping, because in my experience, there's a lot of things that we could do, which is relatively easy to do, especially on the technical level. That's what all these guys are doing all day, of course. But it's really hard to get that message across because so often it's not properly seen where the problem is, right?
No.
So I understand this approach. I'm really in favor of it. But at some point, I mean, if there's no consequence. We have the privacy body in the Netherlands, APE, for example, and everybody knows they're understaffed, so the chances of you getting a fine is quite low. That's what people tell me, right? What about you? Do you have this big weapon actually ready?
I know this. I know this discussion, and
I'm asking for.
If you're understaffed, of course, then it's difficult. But we have the big stick, everything, and not only the big stick. So you have the fining. That's really at the end, and that's repercussion because you cannot mend anything anymore because it's already done, and then you can use fines. But there are all kinds of means you can use in enforcement in front of that. And then you have really at the front, you have all the things about information, behavioral insights, how you call it, working together with branch or companies, talking about how you can address risks. Maybe missing standards are there. Then you take the approach to the standardizing community and say, maybe we can work something up. So there's a lot of that, but the stick is always there.
They listen to you because of the stick, right?
Yeah.
You want the reason to listen to you is because you want to do the best thing.
Yeah.
Of course, well, hopefully that's always the case. Yeah. But the other one is if you don't listen, there's this stick always.
Yeah. And that's,
how big is this stick, by the way? What are
I don't know from by heart. We have different forms of regulation, so different fines. In NIS, they are quite heavy. They're in the NIS directive.
And they're also
literally defined
personal level,
on a maximum.
Personal liability.
And a personal liability, That's also end of pipe. So if we get there, well...
hopefully, your goal is not to be there. I get that.
Yeah,
but to me, it's important to understand if an organization really does nothing, what's the ultimate consequence?
Then we can put all our enforcement measures in place. So we can use how you call it. I don't know in English right yet, but you can work with finance. So if you don't do this or do that, then you have to pay. Then you have to, and if you're past that, then there's also the possibility that someone in the board of the organization is frustrating a better resilience on security in the organization, and you can ultimately also put that person out of the board or on this specific topic. Saying you're not eligible anymore to steer.
Be criminal investigation also?
No criminal investigation.
You're not going to end up in jail, but you're going to lose your job.
You can be replaced for a certain time on this matter in the board for something like that. So then you're out of
It's hard. It
options.
doesn't look good on your resume.
No, that's. I think if your committee of supervisors is looking over your shoulder, then they say maybe it's time to move. So
And
you don't want to get
had
there.
a fine as well, so they weren't all too happy with you anyway. Yeah.
So it's there, and we already did a lot of cases already on big organizations, also in the Netherlands, which were ultimately ended up into fining. So we use it, but. Yeah, preferably.
You hate to use it, but if you have to, you can.
Yeah, we sure do. Yeah.
Let's explore a little bit. There's all these other industries, like the telecommunication industry sector. You have a ton of experience in those fields.
Yeah.
What can the cybersecurity industry or the CISOs learn from this? What works well in other areas? You mentioned aviation, for example, where people learn from the mistakes. That's probably one of them.
Yeah. Already tipped on energy sector, so it's also about safety and health, safety, and environment. HSE is that called. It's quality systems, and that's what they use. So and also telecommunications sector already also there, because their main goal is to deliver on continuity of business. It's not only about profit. And the weighing of profit versus compliance in their board, but they know they have a societal role also with telecommunications and energy. People need that, like drinking water also. So those companies already have a culture established, focused on continuity of their business, and they incorporate cybersecurity also in that same policy. And that helps. Yeah.
I can imagine that for like the utility companies that have that are part private, part public, maybe, or at least the government has a big say in those companies. That's easier to achieve. But you also mentioned aviation. I mean, if there's one sector that fights for profit, it's that one. So why does it work there as well then? Because my point is, if companies by default, their main incentive is money, right?
Yeah.
But what you're saying here is that in aviation, it actually also works. Everybody apparently has safety on their mind.
Because, what's the main difference there? I think it's because everybody in that sector really believes in that main goal of having a secure aviation sector. If you,
it's not just because if your plane crashes more than average, then nobody will
fly you
go bankrupt anyway.
And
that's probably also true.
And they're done out of business, of course. And so it's also an economic perspective.
But it's more than this, if I hear you speak.
It's more than this. People believe, and not everybody still believes in digital more and more, luckily, but not everybody still believes in digital resilience as something that you can benefit from. They still see it as a burden, as something you put into compliance as a cost, and that's not. No.
So how can we change that? And is this among the all employees, or is it the board, or is it the CISO that need to speak up better, or what's the reason?
It's about. Well, I was yesterday speaking somewhere, and there was someone who made the comparison with Groundhog Day, with Bill Murray, the movie. But it was, and I don't. And I think
this can be a very depressing answer.
But it's not about that, because it's also about repetition, and it's also bringing the message into those boardrooms, and not by. Giving your boardroom a lecture about you have to also be a CISO, or it's about making it uncomfortable, talking about continuity risks for your business and about costs you don't want to have in the future. So, and then you get the attention, and also making them digital savvy. So, do you really know what
top-down thing that we need to do? Then, if I hear
it's bottom up and top down talking together. So and making sure that they really know how deeply digital assets have already entered our society and economy, and how dependent you are on them. Yeah.
But do you think that companies don't know this then?
Still not.
No. Surprisingly unaware then.
Yeah. Why is it quite easy to talk about finance? Financial control and financial reporting in boardrooms, that's quite easy. And we cannot talk about digital reporting and digital accountability. And data and digital assets are just as maybe more valuable nowadays than financial.
Now, there are many different kinds of CISOs, but would you say that the CISO should be as powerful in that sense as the CFO, for example? Because the idea of the CFO is this person knows about all finances and about investing and about everything money, right? And the board, he is on an assignment, and if he tells us, we need to invest in whatever, or we need to sell these assets or whatever, then everybody listens. It's not the same, in my experience, as the CISO. It's not at the same level.
It's not at the same level.
Why? Is it because it's immature, or should the CISO be at the same level, you think? Would that be better?
Well, there's a C in the name, but
exactly. Yeah.
So
that's a start.
Yeah, that's a start. But the same level differs from the company, of course. But I think they should at least have, and luckily you see that more and more, have direct access to the board. So if they want to tell something there, they should have access. And if you're a really digital company, then you should have a CIO or a CISO have maybe direct access into your board and really...
I often say that the CISO reports to the CIO and the CIO is in the board.
Yeah, that's there.
But then the CISO is not in the board.
No, but if security is such a main thing, you should consider maybe bringing that for a permanent position into the board.
With their own budget and all that.
Yeah.
Understand, Anything else that we can learn from other sectors that spring to mind?
Well, that's a good one. Other sectors. No, and energy was a good one. Aviation.
Healthcare, maybe?
Healthcare. Ooh, that's a good one. Can we learn from healthcare? You have an idea?
I was when we talk to hospitals. I mean, of course, cyber is really important. But if we're talking about the availability part of the IT, it always strikes me that I talked to a CIO once, and he told me the most important system that we have. We always ask our organizations, where are your assets? That's the first thing we want to know. Where are your crown jewels? What do you want to protect? That's all your trust thing is around all that. His answer was, it's the elevators. And why? Because everything else is super resilient already. I mean, if the planning system goes down, whatever, they have a printout, or they have, and there's the pump for the insulin. There's also a manual thing there, or it's on batteries or whatever. It's not the digital world hasn't penetrated in the crucial parts, except the elevators, because they have to move patients into the operating room into the ER. What I'd say, I think the mindset is certainly there, because I mean, every person that dies is one too many. So the culture that you mentioned earlier in energy and in aviation that you enable, somehow you press a switch and then it starts to work for IT. I think it works less for IT in some healthcare organizations.
And it is, I think, the same thing. You don't see it. It's about.
You almost think that, but don't see it. I mean, there's so many incidents happening, all to the point they were saying, another breach, another breach. If I look on the dark web on my name, there's so many. I mean, there's actually an aviation in a southern European country that I flew with once. Everything is there. My passport, you can simply look it up. It's everywhere. So why is it not? Not on the short-term interface, probably.
It's because maybe we still talk about it too much in terms of security. And not in terms of business continuity and profit loss, etc. Maybe the whole continuation of your company for the future. So if you talk in those terms, and then you realize it's all about the digital choices you make in your organization, then you have maybe a different talk.
It's a good takeaway for all the CISOs who are listening. Huh? I mean, speak the language of your board, and that's risk-based and that's continuity-based.
Yeah, that should be. Yeah.
I want to talk to you a little bit about the international scheme. Before we do, I actually have a treasure hunt that we always do in these episodes. To our listeners, you already know, and we have a few collectors that request each and every T-shirt that we give away. So again, you can win a T-shirt from us. The first 200 people who respond with the following code, I'll name it only once, get that shipped actually. You mail it to code@threat-talks.com and the code is 230026. Good luck. Other countries, because so far we've talked about your experience here. Is this the same? Let's first say the rest of Europe.
Yeah.
That is the approach the same, like building on resilience.
Yes and no. I think yes on the part that other countries are not stupid or something, so they can also they agreed with the NIS directive and they know about the resilient part and about
because
the
it's in the
risk-based
directive
approach.
itself.
Yeah,
It's
so
not,
it's there. It's not new. No.
Mm-hmm.
But then on the other part, they have to work with it, and then kicks in culture. So every European country has their own culture, and some are more centralized, some are more decentralized in their approach. Some are more based on, now like we have in the Netherlands, we work together. It's more an ecosystemic approach, and then you see France, they are a more centralized approach, but look like our German colleagues who really built on structured approach with audits and auditing reports, etc. They use so a lot of standardizing. So that's different.
It follows the country culture a bit.
A little bit, and I think that's well, if you look from a harmonized approach, so do you want to harmonize regulation throughout Europe? Yeah, I think then you have to do something about harmonization. So we do already. For instance, we have under the NIS cooperation group, that's derived from the NIS directive, and they have a cooperation group and all kinds of work streams under there. We also have a work stream on supervision. We kickstarted that, I think, 2 years ago. And we said, okay, we want to have all those regulators, all the supervisory authorities together so they can harmonize. Mm-hmm. So there is something already there to exchange information and to harmonize our approach. But that's the thing about the harmonization. That's good. And we have to do that. But you also have to think about how culture is in organizations in different countries, because that defines how their behavioral stance is in that organization. And you have to take an approach not only on compliance, but also on how does that culture in that company work, and how can you influence that culture and their approach on security and resilience.
Can you explain, do you have an example of how your approach wouldn't work for a certain culture in a certain country or certain type of organization?
Well, for instance, our German neighbors, they really work with auditing reporting and all kinds of reports, and they come into a workflow up to the regulator there, and they look at it, and then they analyze and backbench and work from different cases there. And what we do is we go out there. So we have a more informal talk. But Germany is quite formal. So you have to have a formal approach. Otherwise, what kind of regulator are you? You're coming to drink some coffee here with our CISO and then talk about security. And the approach in the Netherlands works quite well. It's well perceived. So the more informal approach works quite well here, but would not work in Germany. So
So if you would phone up, if you lived in Germany and do the same thing in German, then say hi. I'm going to talk to you about NIS2, and then they will be confused.
They will be polite, and they will accept the invitation. But does that really work? No, they want a formal approach, and they want a nice leaflet and a document to start with, and then they provide you with information and work from there. So that's a different stance.
What about the United States?
Yeah. I have not all the insights on how my US colleagues work, but I have some ideas because often, of course, you talk about this kind of topics.
There's many US-based companies that are here and that you govern, right, or regulate. Yeah,
and I see it's about it's a different culture. It's about pushing risks and liability out of your organization. So it's. Everybody knows the phrase, well, I sue you. That's not, of course, not what I want to say, but it's about liability, and liability is a big thing. So liability in companies, but also of the boardroom members in companies in the US, does something with the culture there about cybersecurity. So compliance is there very important, I think, because if you don't fulfill your compliance, then you're will be held liable.
So you may say that on top of the layer of risk-based approach, there's a liability approach around that if you didn't do manage your risk well enough.
And that's different from the Netherlands, for instance, because in my case, I give more space to companies, and then they have to have their own maturity and take their own responsibility. And they will be held accountable, of course, but it's not like that if they miss one dot in the compliance checklist, they're just like that liable and just accountable.
Yeah, it's not black and white, really.
It's not black and white, no.
There's always a story behind it. What can we learn from the US approach? Is it better in a sense? I mean, can imagine what you're describing, I believe, is that the stick in the United States is more important.
Yeah. And we can learn from that. So we shouldn't be blind, because ultimately, as a supervisor, you work with the whole portfolio of instruments you have to boost digital resilience. And if the culture there works with sticks, and the stick is the most effective tool you can use to boost the cybersecurity there, then you should use it quite often, maybe. But if you back down there and you say we do nothing,
but you said before, this is the most expensive way of becoming resilient.
Yeah. So lawsuits, etc. Everything you have to do. Yeah. So I don't know if it would work here, but from a whole perspective, I'm a fan of a Dutch professor, a U.S. professor on Harvard, Malcolm Sparrow. My name is Nightingale, so I like people with bird names. But Malcolm Sparrow, and he's worldwide. He's the known guru on supervision and enforcement, and he really works with a problem-based, problem-centric approach. So look about the big problems, the big risks, and fix them. Fix them first. And that's his approach. Not doing just do your thing, like as a supervisor, do your inspections and fine companies, but look at from a public perspective, what are the big risks in the sector or with companies or on a certain team of topic, and approach those, analyze them. What's the real problem, and advance. And then you can do something about it, maybe as supervisor, but maybe you're not the person or the organization who can fix it. Maybe you need someone else. Then let someone else do it.
I mean, your translation of this is that you actually go out to those organizations and listen.
And listen.
That's something completely different. Then there's a law and there's a checklist, and if it doesn't add up all green, then you're liable.
Yeah. So maybe for a little, for example. If you, just fictive example, of course, but company has to do something from a security perspective, and I say, okay, you have to do it, and they say, okay, we really want to do it, but they have no people, no expertise. There's no in the market. There's no vendor or service or something available. Then I can push and push and push and push, but they will not do it, and not because they don't want to, but they're not able to. It's not possible. And then the solution is not there in our relationship, but the solution has to be, there has to be something in the market, or we have to educate people, or go to schools, universities to build a curriculum about it. So then the solution is somewhere else, and not in the relationship between the supervisor and the company.
So then probably also becomes more important to have this stick or the liability, because that will set the record straight, huh?
Yeah.
In organizations that are more hierarchical, I guess. Yeah. All right. I'd like some practical advice from you. I mean, you talk to so many different organizations, CISOs, and everything. I mean, there's a ton of things that you maybe I'd like to. You're there in the board and explain what needs to be done. Tell us, what can we do tomorrow? I am the board member now, and I'm ignorant. And tell me what to do.
Well, dear board member, okay, you just had a boardroom meeting, and then you've talked to your CISO, and then the first thing you want to do is give the CISO a lot of money and say, hire all kinds of security companies who give us advice on how to approach this.
Many people are making notes now, I think. Yeah.
And of course, that's good for your CISO that you back him up and you want to give him budget. But the first thing you should do is start with your risk analysis. What's your main business goal and your processes behind it? Those are your crown jewels in your organization, and start there. Do a risk analysis. What do I want to really keep safe and have continuity built up around it? So, and from there, work. With that perspective, look, how do I want to prevent and mitigate on those risks? That's just the first step you really have to take. Yeah.
Sounds a lot like what we always do with Zero Trust indeed. First, make sure that you know what you want to
It's a reasonable approach. Yeah.
What else? You mentioned boardroom awareness also a couple of times. Is this what you mean by it, or how can we practically do this?
Well, and the other one is, of course, educate. It's in the NIS directive, but also within the financial DORA. It's the NIS for the financial sector. It's about boardroom education. So that's also there. Boardroom awareness should...
the board needs to go to school, I heard.
Yeah.
As a very simplified translation.
I want to add a little bit on that because it's worked out and then you have the board and they do a little bit of a checkbox training. I don't like it. You don't want to have CISO light training. That's also I borrowed that from a professor in the Netherlands about cybersecurity. She says that a lot.
Okay.
But and CISO light is don't do a little bit of the curriculum CISO has, and then in small parts, and then you have a CISO in the boardroom. No, you already have a CISO. So don't do CISO light, but walk them through. Rehearse with them. Do practice. Do a little bit of a scenario practice with your board.
Is this a call out to the CISOs?
Should be able to. Depending on how the regulation is built up, they say you have a certified trainer right now. That's what was in the in the regulation. Well, is the CISO a certified trainer?
Some are,
some are, some not. So there's a little bit about the regulation, but from my perspective, you should have someone who is able to have a little bit of a good tone of voice, the right words, and the right approach on really convince the board of the risks they have and asking the right questions. So. Do we have agreements with our suppliers about security? It's a simple question, but if you don't know that you have quite a big stack of suppliers, because it's not one supplier, but your supplier, if you break them down, then you have a whole stack of suppliers. Do we have really good agreements on how to work with them, and do they know our risks, and can they provide on our risks from our supply chain? Those questions you really should be able to ask, and if that's in the training. And you're being able after the training to ask the right questions, then it's a good training. But do not have a CISO light training. That doesn't work. No.
Okay. And for all board members.
And it should be if you're going to practice, all board members. Everybody should be aware of what risk you have.
Practicing a data breach is also really fun to do, by the way. It's almost like a team building
and then you know how incompetent you are, and then you can really work from there.
Then you can start working on
that's good. Yeah.
Many organizations also ask for guidance. Yeah. Tell me what to do. Tell me what measures, what products to buy.
Yeah. Guidance. I think guidance is good. Every regulator should provide guidance, but you have two more ways to approach them. But you have the lazy guidance way. So that's when you provide companies ask for guidance, and they say to me as a regulator, "Can you give us some guidance?" And then I give some guidance, and then something goes wrong, and they said, "Yeah, but that was not in your guidance. You skip that one." Yeah, but you have to be mature. So that's not the right way. So then they get lazy and really ask for directions for every corner. That doesn't work. So what you want to do is give guidance on more principle-based matter. So what do I want you to achieve? On what level that works? And then we have to set the bar. Which direction or which maturity levels we want to see. But the how to achieve that should be within the companies. And guidance, you don't want to work that up also only from our perspective. So also guidance should be developed also with other organizations. So in a public-private way. So use standardization bodies, use regulatory colleagues from our perspective, but also have branch organizations involved and work from there and work up with useful guidance, because you have to utilize the regulation within your organization. So the guidance should not only be our compliance goal we give out, but should also should be in sync with the way organizations work.
Yeah, and so what you're pushing a lot is making sure that you do have the right sources of information, right awareness, do good, and then as a result, as an intended by-effect, you become compliant. That's almost what I hear. It's not like the starting point is the compliance.
No, and the difficulty, that's maybe a catch-22 in this situation is If you start with a whole new sector or a new regulation, the first thing organizations call for is guidance. What should I do? Where should I start? But our guidance is limited because we don't have a lot of insight and information, data about your organization or the sector
culture,
you sit,
the systems, the
culture,
sector,
systems on all levels.
Yeah.
And our guidance can be more tailored if we approach the coming years. Then we have a lot of inspections done, assessments, research, and you have a better understanding. And then our guidance will be more tailored to what you need. Yeah.
Terrific.
Yeah.
We're out of time.
Oh, already?
It's going fast. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
but thank you very much.
Yeah.
I mean, we learned a lot. I mean, I think it's, like I said in the introduction, refreshing to always look at do good, and then compliance will and no fines.
Yeah.
Compliance will come and fines will not come. That's the big plan.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thanks.
I hope so.
I heard that there is going to be some guidance later, like there is some brochure that you're working on. I think,
we're working on
recently released.
That was a big question about the introduction of the NIS2 because it's harmonized also across Europe, and then you have a lot of organizations active throughout Europe, also from outside the EU. And where do I address? Where do I do incident reporting? Which regulator do I have to deal with? We have worked up in public-private partnerships, also with a lot of branch organizations in the Netherlands. A little bit of a scenario book, which gives a bit of guidance on this matter. I think it's already available. It's not publicly
my understanding
available,
it's not publicly available, but you can request it. Huh?
Yeah, you can request it.
Yeah, we'll put the way to get it in the show notes, so everybody who's interested can actually get this and then have a good starting point in this ecosystem of.
Yeah, it doesn't give a definitive answer, so you're still self-responsible
right
to make sure. But it helps really.
Thank you for lots of insights today.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed our conversation.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Once again, thank you very much for being here, Jasper. Very insightful, all the stuff that you provided us, and a lot of things that we can actually start doing tomorrow.
And thanks for this talk, Lieuwe. Yeah.
And to our viewers, thank you very much for tuning in today. I hope you like what you saw. And if that's the case, please like us. It will help us spread the word further. And if you're right there, right next to it, there's the subscribe button, which means that next time, the next episode of Threat Talks will be in your inbox. We'd appreciate it. Thank you once again, and see you next time. Thank you for listening to Threat Talks, a podcast by Onto It Cybersecurity and AMS-IX. Did you like what you heard? Do you want to learn more? Follow Threat Talks to stay up to date on the topic of cybersecurity.